Welcome to the Public Transportation Subcommittee meeting. Today we're going to talk about the fleet management. I know that we've been struggling with both maintaining our current fleet and purchasing buses. So maybe I'll just turn it over to you, Mike, if you just want to give like a status update about the current fleet.
Okay. Or lack of. All right. So right now, just give you a rundown on the fleet in the counties. We have C3. It's a 2017. It's roughly got 167,000 miles on it. C4 is a 2019. It's 132,000 round figures on it. That right now is down. That is at D&W diesel. It broke down on 787 just a while back. We've got an estimate of around 11,376 that was approved to have repairs done to it.
What kind of repairs are we talking?
Fuel injectors, high pressure fuel pump went in it. And in these Fords, when that goes, it takes everything out.
Yeah.
The last one, C3, was done. It did the same thing back on December 15th in 2022. That cost us $10,028. We'll come back to that. We'll have a comment on that. C5 is the small bus. That's a 2019. It has 106,000 miles on it. C6 is the one we use for the shuttle in Hudson. That's a 2019 with 103,000. That's the four that we have left. We're anticipating, the last I talked to the dealer, the new bus that has been on order after 2 years. We hope to anticipate getting it sometime October, November. Right, Nurse?
Yeah,
That's what they're telling us.
Where's that bus going to be used for?
That new one coming in? Well, I would imagine that would probably take the place of C3 because highest mileage, and that'll go to Albany. And then we'll move C3 down maybe as a spare or something and try to shuffle them around. Just a note going back, going forward, which we've talked about this on and off over years. If the county, and I don't know the price now, but we had talked over the years about in the future when we buy new vehicles to look within the first year of the purchase to look at the price of buying the extended warranties. Now, the extended warranties, I don't know the price, don't quote me today, but back when I was looking at this, extended warranties were in the $3,000, $3,500 range. So if we had had the extended warranties on, say, C4, $3,500 would have covered the $11,000 repair.
Even at that mileage, the extended warranty
Yes.
would still be
Correct.
valid. Yeah.
Yep. So the extended warranty would carry that over. I don't quote me on the mileage, but we did look into that. And
Is that a $3,000 a year figure?
No, it was a one-time
$3,000
deal.
one time.
So I imagine now it's up into 4,000 to 5,000.
Still worth it.
But when we're considering, we've got to keep these vehicles to 200,000 miles to meet the responsibility of the state, and to, until we can get them to that mileage to turn them in. It's something you really need to consider.
so I think when don't quote me for C1 because the price ended up changing so drastically. I don't remember what the decision was.
Right.
But for C1, we did include that on our quote process. I don't know if we ended up going through with that purchase or not, but that is something that we have noted for all future bus requests, that the extended warranties will be quoted in addition to that. So that will definitely be something that we can do. Although clearly, as you're stating, with the buses prior to C1, that's not something that took place.
And I think you have that, as long as you do it within the period of time before that warranty runs out.
Yeah, right.
However, you know how things go. You got to do it because the fact of the matter is, you let it draw out and things roll along. You forget about it. You don't get on it, and all of a sudden the mileage is running out. And you got to make that decision, and you lose out on that, and then it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like if it's less than 5,
It's almost a no-brainer.
because we almost always are going to spend.
Is any of that cost reimbursable through the federal aid or? If
That
we
would
put it
be
in
a
the purchase
better-
price, do we capture
would
some of it? or-
be a better question for Jim since he works with
Okay.
the reimbursing and things like that. They have some money set aside for certain things like that, but because I don't do the reporting, I'm not as privy to like, yes, this part can be, no, this part can't be, because they can be very critical on what is or is not reimbursable. The
And that might
extended-
affect your bidding process too. I mean, if you're putting it in there as a quote, but it's an
So,
add-on, then.
we don't bid these. We purchase these off of state contracts.
But you're asking for a price. so-
The quote, yes,
right.
yeah, which is, yeah, we always just have it as a general quote and then I just bring that cost to you guys.
But I think what you're saying is that if we could fold it into the purchase price, would it categorically
Then do
be
you
different?
capture some of it in the reimbursement? I
And
don't
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what it depends because it's considered a non-contract
Right.
portion of that purchase.
Okay.
So whether the state would only reimburse for the contractual
Mhm.
expense on that or the non-contract or extended
Yeah.
warranty, I'm not sure. It would depend a lot on, I guess, the specific language and what we're using, like what
Right.
portion of the funds we're using. Is it 5311? Is it cap? Like what is it? Yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
And are the maintenance repairs that we're doing right now, is that reimbursable? Are you also?
So I've never successfully had that done. No.
Okay.
I think that way back in the day, the engine repair, we tried to have that reimbursed and I still don't know that we've received all of that. And that predates me on the
Back,
transportation. committee.
back when we first started, you might remember this, when we had the original C1 and C2s, the engine went both of them. I think they were like a $15,000 item. The county wound up, I believe, swallowing that, on both of those. I know we pushed to try to get it reimbursed
Yeah.
because there wasn't full, when we took them over, there wasn't full maintenance records. There was not, that was a problem.
Yeah,
I believe that maybe if it was full maintenance records and there was a better,
yeah,
kept up record system, then maybe it would have helped.
yeah.
Don't know that for sure, but that was a real problem. Ken Flood pushed real hard to try to get that reimbursement, but I don't know where it was.
And I'm not sure that I'm right because this is me just like wading through old documents.
Sure.
Was part of why that was confirmed to be reimbursable because there was a problem with, I felt like there was a problem with a lot of buses that were purchased and so the state kind of to like put a Band-Aid over that was
Yep.
more willing to reimburse some of those costs.
Yeah, at that time, we only had 4 buses. They didn't have a spare bus. And we talked about at the same time, the issue of it was feasible for the county to have a spare.
Yeah,
When we talked about forming the committee, my suggestion to that was stepping aside as the contractor, looking at from the county standpoint, the county needs to have their own transportation units plus their own spare, no matter whose name's on side of the bus, to keep your system going.
Right.
So that a contractor changes in the future or whatever, you have your own equipment. And that was the reason for it. And before that, they never knew they could even have it.
Yeah.
So when we brought this question up, we went to the state and asked that, and they said, yeah, you were allowed at that point in time to have 25% more.
which is how
So
we
that gave you the extra bus. And I think you're right. Along with that, once we got that, that was page 2 of that, we were able to get the second bus and they did, my mind thinks that they gave us at least money back for one engine.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
that was
necessarily
kind of
know
like-
they got both, but one engine.
Yeah, I think it was almost like a deal that was
Yeah.
kind of created, not necessarily the status
Yeah.
quo.
Yeah. I know it was $15,000 a piece. I remember that distinctly, it was in that range.
But yeah.
And that was foolish because I was arguing with the state myself. You're putting $15,000 in a bus that wasn't worth $15,000.
Yeah, but I don't know that we've tried since then or had the funds available from the state or federal money to put towards the reimbursement of some of these expenses.
Mike, can I ask, the last time we talked about the fleet,
Yep.
you had identified that for C4, C5, and C6 were going to have some maintenance. I think you said 6,000 for C4, 2,000 for
Correct.
C5, and
Correct.
5,000 for C6.
Correct.
Has that happened, or is
No.
that's still the plan
That's
in the next
correct.
in the next 8 months? We do those
And
things.
the reason that goes along with a couple things, C6, and it hasn't had it because we've been putting Band-Aids on it because we haven't got enough buses to keep them running.
Right.
Right now, we're running, every day we're running one of my buses, which is more money, cost money for mileage to the county.
Right.
And we're still short on buses. At one time, as I notified the county, we were down 3 buses for like 3 days. We were doubling up and tripling up and really running the system with like 1 bus. How we did it, I don't really know, but we've accomplished it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was getting hairy, and there is normal maintenance according to DOT regulations, according to my maintenance program, which has really worked well for us. We're changing that. We had planned that because of the mileage and the age of the vehicles that should be coming due. And actually some of it's been past due. Where we like to spread it out, which we haven't had that because of the newness of the vehicles, but now it's getting to the point you're gonna have this coming up.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, it hasn't happened yet. C6 has to go to Don Brown Bus Sales because the headliner is coming loose in it, and it has to be repaired. It has to go up. It's out of warranty. It's going to be we had a price a year ago to have it repaired, and that was like $3,000. That's going to have to get another price adjustment. So I don't know what that's going to cost.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be down at least a week to 10 days at Don Brown's. But again, I can't send it up there until we get everything back in
Right.
service.
So I think when you had said $5,000 for maintenance, that doesn't include the headliner. The headliner is in addition to that.
Headliner for C6.
Yeah, C6.
C6 is probably no. That's probably including headliner.
Okay.
That's probably including headliner.
I know you're still waiting on a new bus that we ordered 2 years ago. Do you have any idea of what the ordering time is now, regardless of state funding available? What is the time frame for ordering one?
Once a bus is actually ordered, so regardless of however long it takes to receive that approval,
Mhm.
the state contract is about 16 months. So about what we're at right now, I would push that out. I don't think the state contract is ever.
So forget the state contract. I mean, what if you wanted to pay for one? What's the time frame to buy it?
Well,
Non-state contract, we would just buy one off a lot.
Just to expedite things.
Well,
You're
yeah.
sort of saying.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we're always trying to get funding approval, but.
Yeah, I mean, and that depends on what lot we buy from, how ready that bus is, what does it need to meet ADA requirements or things like that too. So that would be on like a case by case basis. The one time that we did buy off lot, from the date I issued the purchase order to the date we received it, it was within the same month. When it was up and running though, I'm not exactly sure.
probably you could have it up between that 60 days.
Yeah,
If everything works together. The
Yeah.
problem is that since COVID and everything, there's 2 things that I believe and this is only my opinion in the business. COVID and the electric buses have slowed everything down, the process. They're leaning towards working on the electric buses, so they're not producing as many. They're only producing what's ordered. So that slows things down. I wanted to talk about other options we had discussed. I just talked today, Don Brown Bus Sales has 4 used buses that we were going to have a conversation about. I also asked the concept if they had any new buses coming. They will have a couple new 20-passenger buses. They could expect to be on the lot at the end of September. You're looking at $154,000 for those 20 passengers with 7 wheelchair capabilities. Now that's a 20 passenger. It's a little bit less than what we're running 24 passengers with 4 wheelchairs. It's a little smaller.
And what was the cost? I'm sorry.
$154,000.
But those are new ones.
Those are brand new.
Yeah.
Now, in that same conversation, what I was looking at was just to get some information. They have some 2016s with anywhere from 40 to 60,000 miles on them. They're 24 passengers with 6 and 7 wheelchair capabilities. Now they're asking $79,000 a piece for them. How much? $79,000.
So about half if you get a 2016.
Correct. However, in my opinion, with just looking at them online with pictures, I would estimate we've got to put $5,000 in them. There's paint work that has to be done, there's tires
I'd
and
rather buy
brakes
it
and whatever.
than-
And that's my,
If it
and
was-
that is the point.
right,
of
if it was like
investment.
1 year
If it was
old to 2 years old.
$50,000, I would have a different argument. But at $79,000 and put another 5,000 into it.
Right, 'cause then
At this point.
Right, the risk seems so high.
Were those buses lease buses?
Yeah, they're probably leased by somebody and they turned it back in.
Is that something we should consider?
Still, you can't get them.
Oh, you
You
can't.
just can't get them. It's there's no,
I mean,
nobody has.
C3 and C4, we could order tomorrow. And, if it takes a year and a half, you're gonna be up well over 200,000 miles on each one.
Well, what is it? I mean, if we bought a bus not through this system or eventually got paid back,
Yeah,
it would certainly relieve a lot of pressure on our fleet, right? Is that we're sort of like a bus
We
behind.
did last time it worked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
That's what
I
I'm
don't-
thinking, do
yeah.
we go to the ARPA committee and ask if we can get $150,000 of ARPA funding and just go buy one and,
no. James is gonna be better about that, but we did allocate money towards a bus this year that we're not in any position to get approval for and purchase too, so I don't know if some of those funds could also be
I mean, we
attributed
put it
to a
in the
bus
budget
that-
for this year to expend it with
And
the
then-
idea that we would get reimbursed.
Yes.
So there's
yeah.
an expenditure and a revenue for
Yeah,
that.
So I don't know, like, how much of that
Yeah.
would be workable, I'm not.
Yep.
That is not my thing. Yeah, so we would still have to go through an approval process with the state to do that, but yeah, it's a lot faster to do it that way. Essentially, what we would have to do is get a letter from Don Brown with the cost. We would have to compare it to the state contract pricing and the pricing for other county purchases and just send it to them that way. So you almost have to do a cost analysis. But it's certainly faster than going through the entire.
And I wouldn't just take Don Brown's. If you were gonna do that, let's
Yeah,
do a search.
whoever it would
We
be,
could do
yeah.
a search. We could do a search.
but 154 is within
Mhm.
range of what we.
Yeah,
currently
so I
are doing.
don't know, like, I would need to see the specific.
And that's a 20. If you were gonna buy exactly what you had, that's a 24 passion, it's gonna be more than that.
It's not, the pricing is not terrible, let me put it that way. It's pretty like on par, it is a little bit smaller, so will it be long-term, or is it just the Band-Aid and then eventually that would move into the spare? Or like.
Yeah, the thing that I'm seeing, well, and I'll be honest with you, there's been so much discussions. I don't have that answer because I'm going on all the discussions.
Yeah,
You've had discussions of, do you continue all the routes? Do you eliminate a route? Do you move a route around? Do you, all this
Yeah.
discussion's been on the table. So I don't have that answer.
Either do it.
I'm trying not to direct the purchase. I'm trying to be open. So I don't have that answer. If
You
you're,
would find a use for that bus no matter what.
Absolutely. I would much rather at this point, and it goes against what I would have said 2 years ago, I would much rather see you buy the bigger bus, what we're using, because you always can have the use for the bigger bus. I'm finding now C5 is a less use because we have more people in Albany, we have more people on the shopping shuttle, we have, and C5 is starting to be
It's starting to be
a
crowded.
problem
Okay.
in some situations.
Well, I think it's worth, I guess, getting a quote for a 20 and a 24, right? Passenger. In like, it sounds like there's interest in just expediting, getting an extra bus in. We don't have enough information to like make a commitment, but it sounds like we're interested in moving forward on that plan. Is that what I'm hearing?
So get bids. These
well,
quotes.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
let's
at
advance that.
So Marissa, you're talking about state approval. You're talking about state approval
you can't purchase a bus no matter how you want to do it unless the state approves it.
because
it's
they're
public
providing the funding
transportation.
for it, right?
Yeah, well, and because you're taking the public on that bus too,
Sure doesn't
we
involve-
pay Mike.
So they're gonna complicate it no matter what.
Yeah, it has to, no matter, you can't do anything at all with
Okay.
transportation without getting some form.
Yeah, so here's your problem. If that's what you're saying, you can't buy a bus. Because when the new bus comes in, you're gonna have 5 buses, you can't add another
Right.
bus.
Well, that is definitely like part of, I think, the conversation that is, and I think we talked about it a little
Yeah.
bit. I mean, part of what I would like to reiterate to the state is to up that number. 5 is not a feasible number for us. We clearly say that. If we're gonna make an argument that we need to retire buses sooner, which we definitely do, I feel like in that argument, we also need to say, look, this does not meet the needs. 5 buses, we just had 3 down. You need to increase that number. At that point, that would allow us to keep more.
Well, in your argument also, I think what could help the argument is the change from now from pre-COVID.
Yeah.
The change is the things that no one can help is number one, there has been places that you can take the buses to be repaired have closed. We have less places, as you can see, when we're talking about, we need prices. We can't go out and find anybody to give us prices on repairs because there's nobody to give you repairs.
Or they're so slammed
Vendors.
anyway. That
And,
they can't get you out.
Ford dealership, 2 Ford dealerships, one didn't even says, I can't even give you a price. And the second one says, yeah, you can bring it here, but it's going to be 2 weeks before I can even get it in to give you a quote. And that's a Ford dealership.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That timeline
So,
in conjunction with how long. it takes to
Pre-COVID,
get
that
out.
was never an issue.
Yeah.
Absolutely never. I could call 5 places. Never an issue.
Mhm.
And we're finding the same thing with our equipment. And what also is concerning me now, and I can say this now because I have now a 12-year history, I'm going back to my concern, worried how it was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Now I'm worried about not only the engines, I'm worried about the heaters, the air conditioners we're having problems with because they're getting older, they're getting deteriorated. Now we're going to get the heat calls. I'm right in Albany. It's cold on the bus. It's hot. It's, there's no heat. And we haven't had those calls in how long?
And that's regardless of the fact that we upgrade all of those things when we purchase off of state contracts.
Right.
So we upgraded our air conditioning
Correct.
systems, our heating systems, and
Correct.
that's still me having a problem. So there's not even like an avenue for us to upgrade it further at purchase.
And that's just out of my hand. I can't do anything with it. I have no control over that.
So we've been talking about trying to get out, like, to sort of break down the system that we have right now with the state DOT, where the state DOT kind of says, we have these regulations that really don't fit us because like
Sure.
the mileage requirements
Right.
don't, like, we can't hit those marks.
Correct.
And so then you can make an exception, but then to get the exception is this huge process that can easily take a year.
Oh, absolutely.
So knowing that we're basically going to have to do this on every single bus, except for the newest one
Yeah.
over the next couple of years,
Yeah.
our hope is that we could just try to go all, like, kind of present the whole package and say, look, here's our fleet, here's our schedule when we actually need to replace them, rather than like battling on each bus. Can we just come up with a feasible transition plan to replace all these buses over the next 5 years? And we could just present that, maybe pull in some other influential people from New York State who could maybe help us expedite it. I was wondering if I could ask you a few things about that landscape.
Sure.
So, like, what should our target mileage be? I know that every bus is different, but what's the average range of when we really should be retiring a bus?
Well, I think 175,000 miles is a good goal. That after that, you're starting to look at the breakdown issues, because stuff
Right.
is starting to wear out.
And C11 made it to 182, right? Made it like 7. And even a few of these, right? C3 is at 167. It's like, it's like,
And it's right now, it's going to have $12,000
Right.
worth of.
so it's kind of
repairs.
coming to end of life. So at 175 might even be,
And we've got 12
too far.
years now with the same contractor that's been doing all the work to have a 12-year history.
right.
To be able to go back and say, this is the same thing. We're using the same oil. We're using the same maintenance program. We have all of the records to show 12 years. This is the kind of mileage over the same roads, the same route, the same drivers. This is the numbers that we're seeing.
Do you think it's mostly mileage or is it number of years?
It's the vehicles. It's the
Right.
equipment we're buying. Go back to the same thing. If they're putting apples to apples, if the state's sitting here and I'm saying, you're comparing us to CDTA, but the bus that CDTA you're using to compare is $350,000. It's meant to go 350,000 miles.
It's a totally different vehicle though, right?
That's the point.
So, but what I'm asking is that, like, C3 is a 2017.
Yep.
Is the key driver that it's approaching 175,000 miles, Or is it like, look, when a bus is 6 years old, it's just gone through enough winters?
It's going, that bus, C3 and C4 have been the prominent buses going to all of them.
Yeah.
C5 is a small bus. It does occasionally, and we can swap them out, but C3 and C4 are diesel. C6 is a gas engine.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're asking, Mike, both factors really have a factor into it, but I think if we're pretty consistent in how many miles you're putting on a vehicle a year, then, pick your mileage and
Yeah,
years are gonna
exactly.
match it. So it doesn't
Right,
really.
right. The one thing that we've done now, because we've started out with all brand new vehicles
Right.
here, that we've kept them clean, we've kept them maintained, we've kept them up to par. We don't have the rust factor that we did when I started 12 years
Mhm.
ago. These were rust buckets.
Hmm.
They were in junk. I was patching and painting and fixing rust constantly. These aren't, because we started brand new, we undercoated them, we kept them up in service, we all constantly washed
Yeah.
them. We kept them clean. That was a big deal. So, yeah, we've got maintenance problems because of the mileage and the wear and tear. We don't have rust problems.
And is it safe to assume, for the purposes of like our modeling with DOT, like, should we just assume that like every bus gets an equal amount of miles over the next couple of years? Or
We try to.
is that like, I know it doesn't have to be exact, but it seems like the easiest way to be is to be like, look, our service we do a total of 200,000 miles across a year. We're going to divide that by equally among all the buses.
Well,
This
here's
is how we're
the
projecting
other thing. In a perfect world, if you had got a good consistency of 5 buses consistently, that was the other plan.
Right.
You can rotate everything
Right.
constantly. We haven't been able to maintain 5 buses.
Right.
So you can't take
So
one
you
out of
can't-
service
you
to do
can't-
the service.
right,
you know,
right. So you can't do that. So that's why we've been so wishy-washy on it. That's why we're so out of whack with C3. Shouldn't have 167. C3 and C4, they're because of their age difference, but they shouldn't be that far out. You look at C4 and C6, you got 20, almost 30,000 miles difference. It shouldn't, but it is,
Right.
because we don't have another bus.
Because if C11, if we had C11,
And the engine went on C11, so that
right.
was out. We haven't replaced C11.
Right. So we're actually gaining, even if we're spreading them out equally, it's a higher amount because we don't have a spare to split to spread them
And
across.
Mike, you said before about CBTA, having the buses in different buses that gets 350,000 miles, and the state's looking at those numbers, but how many spare buses did they have parked right there?
Exactly. Probably got 20. Exactly.
You know,
Just for taking the
So,
bus. Yep.
if one's down, you take send it away for
Absolutely.
service, you put another
Yeah.
one in service,
Yep. And if
the
they don't
bigger
get,
fleet has the ability to be able to do that.
and if they don't get to fixing it today, or they're waiting for parts, it's not a big deal.
And you can rotate them,
Sure. Absolutely.
Rick, you've been quiet. What do you think?
Well, one of the things that I'm thinking about is obviously the shopping shuttles, the wear and tear of stopping and going in the city. The mileage isn't gonna be there before you start needing brakes and rotors and
Yeah.
everything else that come along.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can, look at just miles in
Mhm.
itself without rotating them to the point where they get on the highway and start getting some highway miles.
Right.
And we start taking the other ones.
And he's got smaller ones that he uses, the shuttles rather than the long ones,
Yep.
so that's
And
not
that's why we
always.
need a fleet that we can rotate. If
Mhm.
absent that, you're gonna have these shuttles, buses that are.
Now they're,
A lot less miles.
I'm glad you said that, because you just
Yeah.
made me think of something. Something that has changed in the last 3 months with DOT. DOT, I'll give you an example. Brakes and rotors, you pull your car apart and you got a little rust on the rotor, or a brake shoe or something has a little rust on, you clean it up and service it and put it back together. It's no problem. It's never been an issue because it's not an effect of the wear of the brake pad or the drum touch. DOT specifications now does not allow you to do that. If your brake rotor, or if your shoe, the back of your shoe, or any component of that unit has rust on it, you have to replace it. You're gonna have more expenses.
Right.
So basically, anytime you pull the wheels now and you experience any rust, which is just normal rust that the bus sits, or weather-wise or whatever, you're gonna have to replace it.
Okay.
So you're gonna see more money coming out of stuff that would normally, you would never replace in the course of a year. And it would have been perfectly legal, no problem. I'm having that argument with DOT on the school bus side right now.
Yep.
And even the inspectors are like throwing their hands up.
It's gonna be worse with the.
And then we got too much trash too, you know?
Right, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
We just add more trash, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So these are things that are, and you're right, the limo crash, that limo crash created such havoc in the street in our business. Is unbelievable, which the business was not a problem. That limo
Bad actor.
made an unbelievable amount of issues in our business. Which, you know, we're paying for it all the way around.
That's the world we live in.
Yep.
The people that we talk to in the state in terms of trying to get all this either approved or disapproved or just getting a general idea of what we can and can't do, do they actually come down here at any given time?
So Samantha, our rep, came down a few months ago to see Jim and I when we were being audited. And Mike, we went over to Mike too. That was the first time I've ever met any of them. And, you know, since I've been with the committee, I do not think that it's regular. I have had conference calls with some of the individuals. However, we also go through these individuals so regularly that even if they had come down, it's hard to keep.
Yeah.
I think that going.
It's really hard for us to give the full story, you know, of why we need additional vehicles.
Yeah, well, and I mean, in addition to that, the individual who came to see us is the individual who would make that decision. So she would just report whatever we put to this person who would then report it to this person. And that's where the approval process comes down the stream. So who we're even seeing she's almost just like an interpreter. Like she interprets what we put out, make sure we have the correct documentation or whatever is required for argument, and then just pushes it up. I will say this was her first time ever seeing like buses like ours or anything like that. I believe when she came over to Mike's with us, so there was no previous idea on what we're doing, how we're doing it, or what we're utilizing to do it. So no, they don't regularly come down here, but even then, it's not fruitful, I suppose.
That's what I'm thinking is like to try to reset, like the pattern that they've set up for us is not like that's why I wanted to be like, let's present the full picture of what's going on.
Well, and the only way we got this bus purchased was because you started helping, and you brought other people in to help, and then we almost, on our correspondence, we didn't just use our rep, we started CCing higher and higher in DOT to kind of get those responses pushed down as well. So we can make very little headway without, I think, higher ups here and higher ups there somehow being interested in the conversation. But no, they have no real working knowledge.
There has to be a squeaky wheel.
That's typical of big DOT.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, that's, squeaky wheel is
Big squeaky wheel.
like 7 squeaky wheels is the only way I think we've been able to move forward.
Yeah, it's like triangulate.
it's a good fun there, you know that.
Yeah.
Make sure there's no rust. Gotta be the rusty wheel.
Yeah.
What were you gonna suggest, Greg? What were you gonna suggest in terms of what we should do?
No, I think, you know, talking to our state officials, you know, I hate to go over anybody's head
Yeah.
on that level, thinking that they didn't cooperate, so we had to jump to our elected officials.
Yeah.
I do what you gotta do.
Yeah, and I think they understand that to a certain extent. So Samantha, our rep now, was with us when we went through the purchase last time. And I don't think that it reflected poorly on her necessarily. I think if anything, it just brought to light the fact that nothing was happening until we did that.
Yeah, I mean, because we, you know, on the Board of Supervisors, get continuous requests to expand countywide.
I couldn't.
And here we're barely keeping our current.
Right.
schedule, staffed and supplied with buses, and it's not gonna happen unless we bring it to somebody's attention there saying, look, are you on board? Sort of like broadband or something of that nature. Are you on board with transportation?
Right.
Even expanding it means that you're gonna have to start approving more money. Sure. And more equipment.
Yeah, and faster, right? Yeah, the state is committed to us having a functional transportation system. We need, like, the current mechanisms are not working.
Right, correct.
So it sounds like kind of all the above. I think we should advance looking at sort of a direct purchase. We should talk to DOT about that advanced purchase, and simultaneously we should work on this like fleet management plan and present it to DOT as well as our state officials. And in the meantime, just kind of do our best.
For what? For talking to, yeah, don't put me there. I mean, put me there, but someone should censor me. Yeah.
That's the way I would be.
That's how, yeah.
Someone should censor you?
It's
Too late.
Yeah.
Jim, no, I think that would be the best way to do it. In terms of a direct purchase, if we could have like a quote
I
from
could
Deborah,
work on some quotes.
Then
I'll get some different vendors and have.
yeah,
some
I could
come in and
probably
forward to you.
expedite the
Sure.
process a little bit with the state if I have that information for us.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Anything else to add?
I have a couple quick questions.
Yeah.
Before you go in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Those monies are approved? Before?
Yes.
All of them, the 11,000. Yep,
Yep, that was approved. And you got the
I do. I
polling bill
have.
correct?
Yeah, thank you for
So that's,
correcting that.
yep, okay, that's all set. I have a question, and before I have the questions, it's just sort of not a complaint, just, and maybe you can clarify it.
I bet it is.
With the runs that Pro Park does
Yes.
afterwards, here's a couple of things.
Yeah.
In the contract, aren't they supposed to have a spare bus?
Yes,
Do they?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think the one time that they've canceled twice the service, and so one time they canceled because their spare bus was being serviced, and then a bus broke down, and I think you were referring to like how it's difficult to get service done. They haven't been able to find someone to service the bus near here. I know that like you do a lot of service like in your shop, so like they actually drive their bus pretty far away for service.
Okay.
So then when they needed, basically it wasn't feasible to take their bus out of service to get it here on time, right? So I guess every 6 months they have to bring it to like a DOT. I think it was actually, I'm not sure if it's getting service or is this being inspected. In order to get it inspected, they have to like drive it an hour away or an hour and a half away. So when the bus broke down, the spare bus was an hour and a half away. So that was the one time. And the second time over the weekend, they had a driver, like their driver quit and they just weren't able to patch together a replacement driver. So if
Okay.
It-
Those things happen.
right, yeah.
I'm not complaining. I'm just,
it's worth being understanding what's going on.
yeah, I mean, I'm held to a contract.
Yes.
I was just clarifying what they're held to.
Right. And I think to be clear, on the one hand, those things happen.
Sure.
And on the other hand, like it's pretty disruptive. Like people, the
Right.
transportation service really relies on reliability. And so when you
And
bring-
I get the phone calls because we're in the daytime and
yes,
I just refer them to the county. I can't answer and I'm not gonna answer. I'm not gonna
Right.
pretend
yeah,
that
yeah.
I wouldn't answer that. That's not.
Yeah.
But it puts you in a tough spot. And I think
Right.
if to some extent are these learning curves, it's like a new
Right.
service, and if it continues, I think the service is only feasible if it's consistent. So I think like if these at some point these irregularities are too disruptive, the service isn't feasible.
Just let you know. The second thing is we've been getting phone calls.
Yeah.
That when we're letting them, when the transfers are going from our company to theirs, they're not making the first or second stops.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because we're getting phone calls on our answer machines, or they're calling the office and saying, well, how come your bus didn't pick me up at such place, whatever? And come to find out, it's during their period of time that they're taking, that's what they're complaining about.
So it's just driving by people.
Or they're not going there.
It's not that people aren't getting dropped off. It's just that
People
people are like waiting.
supposed, I guess they're, from what my office is getting.
Yeah.
That people are standing at the stop, the bus is not coming.
Okay.
I can't answer anything other than that.
Well, it's good. It's good for us to know. So yeah. We'll have to follow up.
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
this- But that seems to be the calls that we're constantly getting now. Doesn't every day, but like, when I was away last week, our office got 5 phone calls about for 1 week. And again.
Around the same like first or 2 stops right after transfer.
Yeah,
Okay.
right after our transfer, because well, first off, I was like, sort of the bear and saying, well, why aren't we picking them up or whatever? And my office versus says, knock it down. No, it's not ours. It's the next company.
Yeah.
Oh, so just to inform that. And I know we're having the other transportation committee is having talks about the electric bus and stuff like that. So I know that's something that you're gonna have to continue this
Yes.
conversation and knowing where this is all going. But that conversation goes into what we've just been talking about.
Yeah,
And,
Availability.
and
Right. It takes the same.
do you
problem.
want to do that, or do you want to push to buy new buses now?
so I looked into the electric vehicle charging stations a little bit yesterday, actually, unrelated to our specific transportation, but in general. And the state contract that was being piggybacked off of for those purchases is currently expired. So even if we wanted to do something right now, we're kind of in like a lapse period where we're waiting for the state to put that back up to award it to someone. It was originally, I think, to the charge point or something like that before. So they're waiting to get those bids back in, evaluate them, and initiate another state contract. I think it'll also be easier to have a plan once that's instituted, because it will also come with a cost. And maybe evaluation will be better done then. Last I checked on electric vehicle bus purchases, they did add that to the state contract. However, there was no award made. I do expect that to be changing in the next few weeks, but it's really hard to plan when we're given exactly 0 information on how
Sure.
a municipality.
Mike, I think you're gonna see a major fail with the school districts on that initiative. So the dates that they're throwing around from state government are just not gonna be feasible mostly because of infrastructure, needs and whatnot.
Yep.
Not that it isn't an answer for the future, but, timeframe wise,
But right. We might need to double that.
yeah.
So, and my old fashioned way of saying, and people can disagree with me, I'm just putting it out there. Do you consider what you're saying, what you're doing now? Do you consider the possibility of doubling it and buying 2 buses? Now,
But what Marissa is telling us, I think, is what you're saying is
Can
that
we
even
try
if we want to buy it, so if we've got 5 buses and we want to replace one of those 5, we can use our own funding and go do that. But if we wanted to add a 6th, we can't do that because we don't have state
It
approval.
would be a separate approval process, a separate sort of thing. So I think technically we could like have one hanging out.
but if,
But I don't know that we can actually utilize.
but if
it.
if your goal is to bring your state people to the table,
Yeah,
put it in the plan now.
oh, yeah,
To expand your system to 6 and.
I totally
With
agree.
the idea in the background to get a 6th one, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Almost reach for the star.
Yep.
Because you're gonna save no matter how you do this.
Because if you're gonna go to EV, you gotta have 12 of them.
well, I
so-
would.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think we should pitch expanding the fleet.
Well, and what is that number? So right now we're at 5 and 5 doesn't work. Will 6 work? Or do we?
It'll work.
need
Well,
to-
my
More than
my
that,
thought is
though.
this, is 6 would work because you're saying if you go to 6 and you get the approval to go to 6, you're gonna buy 2 more
And then right off.
and you're gonna have
the bat.
6 because you're gonna buy 2 more before you have to buy electric buses.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my point.
Get you a couple more years.
That's my point.
Right.
Or can we just say that we're replacing
Right.
2 of the ones we've got
Correct.
without requesting state funding.
Correct.
Well, because that was the other thing that I
Yeah.
attempted to do was preemptively retire extra buses. So I'm like, okay, look, you
So
just
keep them,
approved,
you
you
know.
approved my retirement
Yeah.
for these buses in 2 years,
Right.
therefore I want approval to purchase the
Right.
2 buses.
Right.
And then I received
Right.
no response on that. They were like, get me the backup documentation, which by that they mean every single maintenance invoice for that bus since we've had it, which my office is working on. But they just asked along when I tried to preface it that way too, because they'll only look at one part before they'll even look at that. So to say, hey, I want to preemptively retire this because it'll take 2 years anyway. So this is the projection. They were still like, well, you don't need that. So no, it wasn't. The forward planning lacked, not so much on our end, but on the
I
state.
get it. I know. I'm just looking at loopholes to help you to move forward. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, that's my hope, rather than having to wait until your vehicle is already defunct to then replace it and wait 2 or 3 years to get the new one.
Well, the
It's just-
timeframe ordering is, and that's everybody's problem.
Right.
I mean, you know.
So it's sort of like you need to plan ahead and say
Yeah.
this bus, like this bus works totally fine right now, but we
Yes.
anticipate
Right,
2 or 3 years from now it
Exactly.
won't. So we
Right.
need to start the process now. It seems like the rules are written not only for buses that last much longer, but at a time when you could replace buses really
Right,
fast.
correct.
So
That
like
used
there's
to
a
be the
couple
case
things.
years
Used to be
ago.
fine,
You know,
yeah.
it used to be bad enough, but
Yeah, but it would work, right?
Right.
And
you have
at
to struggle
times,
for 6
there
months.
there would be buses sitting on a lot
Yeah.
someplace. You could buy them.
Yeah.
You can't do that. They're not there. And in my business, just what I
it's
said,
not just buses, Mike. I mean, any
Yeah,
of the
anything.
bigger trucks
You
that
can't
you're
buy
trying to buy today. it's
Everybody's
18
bought
months
things
or
up
something,
because-
you know.
the scare of the electric bus, you can't buy a bus.
Right.
Well, even just standard car fleet is impossible.
Right.
If you try to fit that out, you don't get a response.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, so given that we need to plan ahead,
Right.
the rules aren't really written to plan.
And it makes it
Yeah.
challenging for us in budgeting because, you know, you budget for something and then it takes 2 years to get here. Well, I budgeted the money back then.
Right.
but,
And now it's 25,000.
Now where is it, you know?
Right.
How is, Pro Park ridership? Anybody reporting that at all?
You pull up the numbers, if you take Pro Park every month, it's gone up. I think this last month it was averaging about 23% people a day. So it's running for 5 or 6, it's running for like 5 hours. It is way less than the standard shopping shuttle. But if you thought about Pro Park as its own service, it's the second most. I think it has a higher ridership per mile than anything else aside from the shopping shuttle, like the main shopping shuttle. So I think it's like a quarter of the ridership
Are
of
they
the main
finding-
hours.
Mike, are they finding anybody who would just pass up going during other times in the daytime so they can go later in the evening?
Our ridership on
Or is it
the
not
main route is pretty flat over this time period, or potentially even slightly up. So it hasn't been like a decrease in Johnston with an increase in Pro Park. It's that the Johnston is pretty flat and the Pro Park is going up. So overall ridership in the shopping shuttle is higher than ever, but those riders are less than the daytime riders, but it depends on what this, it's way less than the daytime riders, but it's way more than the county ridership. And it's still significantly more than the Albany route, if you think about it as a per mile cost.
But yeah, so it doesn't appear as though people are not going during the day to go in the afternoon. I think.
And I guess there's a fair amount of people who are transferring, it sounds like. So like when we count the Pro Park numbers, we're not counting the transfers because we're counting like initial
They can
tickets.
stay longer.
So there's probably a fair amount of people who are getting on the
Last one.
last Johnson route that like maybe wouldn't have gotten on before, right? Because they're like continuing the route on Pro Park. So there's a pocket of riders that are not being counted as Pro Park, but probably are only riding because the Pro Park exists. So yeah, I would say that we'll see if it keeps growing. And I'll be interested to see if Utopia and Spark want to continue their contribution for
How
additional
long have we
year.
been in that now? When did we start that officially?
I think March was the first.
Yeah, I believe it.
We haven't had a
was.
winner yet with that.
Right. So I
And it wasn't
Yeah.
even a full month.
What was
I
the
don't know.
commitment? How long?
Oh, we're committed to a 1-year pilot.
1 year.
So I think it was kind of a thinking that like we would have 6 months to evaluate and then it takes about 6 months to like, so we kind of need to make a decision in a couple months, probably next month. We need to make a decision. Are we going to continue this or not?
Yeah,
Because then we'd have 6 months to either set up another year or 6 months to spin it down.
It's on their dime, right? I mean, is that our decision for?
Well, it is.
Well, it depends on their funding availability, that's
Right.
what's gonna make our minds up,
I guess I would recommend that they continue funding it. And if they continue funding it, I'd recommend that we continue our part. If they decide not to continue funding it or funding it at a lower
Yeah,
level,
tougher
we'll have
decision.
a difficult decision to make.
yeah, so in terms of timeline, you're right, the intention would be that we would probably reach out to the contractors in the next month or so to decide what terms, if they wanted to extend it, what terms that they wanted to extend it under, reconvene at that point, and then also talk to, you know, the contributors to that finance, so we can make a decision and go through the correct contract process, which again, of course, you gotta do the state bit in that too, which makes it way longer than we would have initially wanted.
I thought we had like a rider in the contract for like a 1-year extension.
2 1-year extensions.
Oh,
But
one.
but
Or
they,
one 1-year
or
extension.
one 1-year, yeah, but they can still, so like with Mike, even though that was an extended, you can still negotiate
Right.
during that period. So you have to communicate with the vendor to see,
What their
are we
terms are
gonna
going to be.
keep it flat or
Yeah.
what it is? Do you want to extend it? And if so, under what terms? And then the negotiation.
Thank you for sending out that reminder.
No problem.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Time to break?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your.
Thank
your-
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rick, you want a second?
Huh?
Second the motion
Oh, I do.
to adjourn.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. See y'all later.
Everyone.
Okay.
Am I